She cut the lock on his gate and let strangers throw a backyard party on his private property because she thought she could. Karen, the overbearing HOA president, believed her self-appointed power outweighed both personal boundaries and federal law. But Jake Harper didn't raise his voice. He followed protocol, and soon, it wasn't just neighbors watching. It was the Department of Defense. But just wait until you hear how this neighborhood standoff took a shocking turn, and why, in the end, justice came down hard and silent. Jake Harper pulled into his driveway just after sunset, his uniform still stiff from the day's heat. After 12 hours of protocols, checklists, and secure zones, home was supposed to feel like sanctuary. Familiar, predictable, safe. But something wasn't right. As he stepped out of his truck, the first thing he noticed was the stillness. Not the peaceful kind, but the off-key quiet that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His eyes automatically scanned the perimeter like they'd been trained to. That's when he saw it. The back gate, wide open. Jake's boots hit the pavement faster than his thoughts. That gate led to a narrow, fenced-in access lane, technically part of his property, but rarely used. He'd secured it with a reinforced padlock just 3 weeks ago after catching a couple of teenagers trying to sneak through. No one had permission to go through that gate. No one should even be near it. Yet there it was, swinging slightly in the breeze. And the lock? Gone. Not broken, not damaged, just missing. Jake's heart rate kicked up, but his steps stayed steady as he walked around the side of the house. A flicker of music, pop music, reached his ears before he turned the corner. Then came laughter, voices, one of them yelling, "Hey, pass me the guac!" His backyard came into view, and with it, the full picture. 2 vehicles, a silver SUV and a dusty black pickup, were parked on the gravel pad behind his house. 6 strangers were in his backyard like it was a public park. A woman in a sun hat was lounging by the pool, legs dangling in the water. A couple of kids chased each other with pool noodles, their shoes kicked off somewhere near his flower beds, and some man, was standing at his grill, flipping burgers like it was a neighborhood cookout. Jake didn't say anything at first. He didn't shout, didn't demand answers. He just stood there, trying to process what he was looking at. The smell of cheap beer and charcoal drifted toward him. There were crumbs on his patio furniture. Someone had moved the cushions. "Who are you?" he finally asked, his voice low but sharp. The man at the grill glanced over his shoulder, spatula still in hand. "Karen's guests," he said casually. "She said we could park here and chill for a bit. Hope that's cool." Jake blinked. Karen? As in Karen Holloway, president of the Homeowners Association? The same woman who once left a typed, laminated note on his front door because his garden hose wasn't the approved neutral color? She gave strangers permission to cut through his property, to use it. The disbelief hit like a cold slap. Not anger, not yet. Just the jarring realization that something profoundly wrong had happened while he was gone. Jake didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked at his grill, at the footprints by his pool, at the cut gate lock he hadn't even found yet, and slowly his military instincts, the ones trained to assess, to prepare, to respond, began to override the shock. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a violation, and Karen had no idea just how far she'd crossed the line. Jake Harper had known exactly the kind of person Karen Holloway was from the moment he moved into the neighborhood. She was that kind of HOA president, the type who didn't just enforce the rules, she weaponized them, the kind who'd walk around with a clipboard and a measuring tape, as if grass height were a matter of national security. She once sent a 4-page printed memo to everyone on the block because someone left their trash bins out for more than 18 hours. Jake didn't take it personally back then. He chalked it up to suburban power syndrome, the need to feel in control of something, anything. But this wasn't a passive-aggressive email. This wasn't an overzealous rule about mailbox colors. This was his backyard, used, occupied, violated, by people who didn't even live in the zip code. Jake hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't threatened anyone. That wasn't his style. He simply asked the strangers to leave, firmly, without room for negotiation. A few of them looked sheepish. One of the kids mumbled an apology. The guy at the grill? He grabbed his cooler and left without making eye contact. As the last car backed out of the lot, Jake walked straight into his house, locked the doors, and pulled up the footage from his security camera. The rear-facing one had a perfect view of the back gate. And there she was, Karen, wearing a visor, tennis skirt, and that perma scowl she seemed to have surgically attached to her face. In one hand, bolt cutters. In the other, nothing. No clipboard, no knock on his door, no attempt to reach out. Just confidence. She approached the gate, adjusted her stance, and snip. The lock gave way like it was made of licorice. She didn't even glance around. She knew exactly what she was doing, and judging by her posture, she believed she had every right. No hesitation. No guilt. Just smug, HOA certified audacity. Jake sat there, watching the footage, his jaw tight, his hand clenched loosely around the mouse. It wasn't rage that hit him in that moment, not even disbelief anymore. It was a quiet, almost mechanical realization, the kind that starts in your spine and works its way up. A switch flipped. Karen had crossed a boundary she didn't even understand existed. She thought this was about fences and neighborhood parking etiquette. She thought the HOA gave her power, authority. Jake knew better, because where she saw neighborhood politics, he saw a security breach. Where she saw common area access, no. He saw unauthorized tampering with a federally protected easement. She didn't know what she had done, but she would. The sun wasn't even high yet when Jake made his way across the street, bootsteps deliberate and even. He didn't knock angrily. He didn't rehearse some dramatic confrontation in his head. That wasn't who he was. He rang the bell and waited. Karen opened the door wearing a pastel pink robe and holding a steaming mug that said #1 HOA Queen. Fitting. She looked surprised to see him, but only for a second. Then the smirk returned. "Jake," she said brightly, like they were old friends meeting for brunch. He cut straight to the point. "You cut the lock on my back gate." Karen blinked once, sipped her coffee, and shrugged. "I had every right to. That gate faces the rear community access path, which makes it common property. You can't just lock it up. It's not yours to block." Jake didn't flinch, didn't even frown. "That gate is on my parcel line," he said calmly. "I installed it. I maintain that ground. And that community path, that's not for public use. It's a designated military emergency lane. It's federally protected." She scoffed like he'd just accused her of trespassing on Area 51. "That's HOA land. It's part of our neighborhood layout. You're overstepping. You're—" "Not," Jake interrupted, his tone still flat, still polite, but edged with something colder now. "I have full documentation. The easement is military infrastructure. I have permits. You cut a lock on federal adjacent property and let unauthorized civilians through it." Karen rolled her eyes, completely unfazed. "Oh, come on. It's not like it's a missile silo. You're just trying to intimidate people with your job. It's a little gate, Jake. No need to blow it out of proportion." There it was, that reflexive dismissal, the belief that if she belittled it enough, it would shrink into nothing. If she said it with enough fake sweetness, the world would bend to her HOA-ordained logic. Jake didn't argue, because there was nothing more to say. She was wrong, blatantly, boldly, and legally wrong. But more importantly, she was too entitled to realize it, and far too proud to admit it, even if she did. He looked at her one last time, nodded once, and turned to leave. Let her enjoy her morning coffee. To the untrained eye, it was just a gate. 6 feet of powder-coated steel, set in a reinforced frame with a digital padlock and weather-sealed hinges. Clean lines, no frills, just a gate. But Jake knew, and had the documentation to prove, it was much more than that. When he bought the house 3 years ago, one of the selling points had been its proximity to the service lane. That narrow strip of pavement, running behind a few of the eastern properties, wasn't listed as a public walkway. It wasn't even maintained by the city. It belonged to a federal easement designated for emergency and military response access. Jake hadn't taken any chances. Before installing the gate, he'd gone through every official channel. Permit from the city? Check. Surveyor's map showing property boundaries? Check. Inspection approval for structure and placement? Check. But the most important signature, That came from the base itself. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reyes, logistics officer, had personally signed off on Jake's gate, with a memo stating that private access points into the emergency lane may be maintained by property owners, provided no obstruction of operational response occurs. Jake had filed copies with the city, kept one in his home safe, and submitted another to the HOA, long before Karen had ever gotten her hands on a gavel. So, no, this wasn't about a backyard shortcut. This was about interference with restricted infrastructure. When Karen cut that lock, she didn't just cross a property line. She entered a zone that, by federal definition, was considered critical operations adjacent. And by allowing her guests to use it as a parking zone and party entrance, she'd unintentionally turned it into a potential security risk. Jake didn't want to make it personal. He didn't need to. This wasn't a matter of hurt feelings or neighborhood drama. This was a matter of protocol. And Jake had spent a decade in uniform, learning exactly what to do when protocol was breached. So he sat down at his desk, opened a blank incident form, and started writing. He attached the security footage, the documents, the date, time, and nature of the breach. And by the time he hit send, the report was in the hands of the base physical security office, flagged as a civilian interference event involving federal access infrastructure. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to knock on Karen's door again. He'd done exactly what the system trained him to do: report, record, act. And now the system would answer. The van turned the corner of the quiet cul-de-sac without a sound. It wasn't marked like a police cruiser, nor flashy like some tactical unit. Just a clean, matte gray government vehicle with a single black decal on the door. U.S. Department of Defense Infrastructure Security. Tagged. Neighbors peeked through blinds, lawnmowers shut off mid-track. Someone's dog barked once, then stopped. 2 officers stepped out, boots first. Their uniforms weren't for show. No weapons drawn, no sunglasses, no dramatic movements, just calm, professional presence. Their jackets bore simple patches: Federal Security Access Enforcement. Jake was already outside, waiting, arms crossed over his chest. Posture relaxed but alert. The kind of stance that said, "I've done my part, the rest is yours." The taller officer nodded once, held out a clipboard for Jake's signature. Paperwork, verification, quick exchange of phrases. They didn't ask Karen anything. They didn't need to. While one officer examined the gate's structure and rechecked the access alignment against a printed satellite overlay, the other opened a small black case. Out came the hardware. A reinforced aluminum warning sign with bold white lettering. Restricted access, military infrastructure, violators subject to federal penalties. And just above it, a sleek, motion-triggered surveillance camera, solar-powered, silent, watching. Bolted into the post, laser-leveled, secured, no drama, no raised voices, just law, quietly installing itself. Across the street, Karen stood stiffly on her front porch, arms crossed in a perfect imitation of defiance, though her expression betrayed her. That forced smile, the subtle shift of her weight, the way her lips tightened when she saw the words federal penalties. She wasn't fooling anyone. The neighbors had come out too, slowly, carefully. Some lingered by mailboxes, others just happened to water their lawns while sneaking glances toward Jake's yard. Phones came out, not in secrecy either. People were recording. They weren't watching Jake. They were watching her. And Jake? He didn't say a word. He didn't gloat. Didn't look in her direction. Didn't nod in satisfaction. He just stood there, hands behind his back like he was back on duty, and let the uniforms do what they came to do. Because this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about order being restored. By the book, by the badge, by the bolts drilled into steel. And the message was unmistakable. This was no longer a neighborhood disagreement. This was federal ground now. It arrived in a standard government-issue manila envelope, unassuming but unmistakable. Stamped in clean, bold ink, U.S. Department of Defense, Office of Civilian Infrastructure Compliance, delivered via certified mail with a required signature, not the kind of letter anyone in a suburban HOA ever expects to receive. It was addressed to the full Oak Ridge Meadows Homeowners Association board, and it contained exactly 3 pages. No pleasantries, no fluff, just cold, bureaucratic precision, and the weight of the federal government behind every sentence. Jake didn't attend the meeting where it was first read. He didn't need to. He already knew what it said. He'd written most of the report that led to it. The letter began with a recap of the incident. An HOA officer allegedly authorizing civilian use of an access lane, followed by physical tampering with an installed gate and unauthorized entrance onto privately maintained federal adjacent property. Then came the legal clarification. The Eastern Service Lane adjoining Mr. Harper's property is classified as Emergency Military Infrastructure Access, EMIA, and falls under restricted jurisdiction. At no point is this lane to be used for community, civilian, or recreational purposes. It is not under HOA control. For anyone in the room, still clinging to Karen's narrative that it was just a harmless community path, that line hit like a slap. But the letter wasn't done. The incident involving the removal of a lock and the admittance of unauthorized civilian guests constitutes interference with protected infrastructure. Any further unauthorized access, obstruction, or modification to this area will result in escalation to legal action under Title 18, Section 1382 of the U.S. Code. And there it was. The polite version of, next time, someone's going to court. No names were used, no accusations spelled out. But every person sitting in that HOA boardroom knew exactly who the letter was about. Karen sat at the head of the table, shoulders squared, lips pressed into a thin, practiced line. She was still in her role, still in her HOA president blazer with the gold lapel pin. But something had changed. The confidence had cracks. Her eyes weren't scanning the room like usual, looking for allies. They were fixed straight ahead, as if avoiding everyone else's judgment might somehow erase it. The board read the letter in silence. Even the usual chatterboxes, the ones who once argued for 20 minutes about approved patio umbrella colors, sat like schoolchildren in front of a principal. No one spoke until Mark Peterson, the treasurer, finally leaned forward and broke the stillness. His voice wasn't accusatory. It was nervous, practical. Are we going to be fined because of her? It was the kind of question that wasn't really a question. It was a shift, a turning point, the unspoken moment when the crowd quietly steps back from the person at the center of the fire. Karen didn't answer. She couldn't. Because any answer would have been an admission of guilt, of failure, of ignorance. And Karen Holloway didn't do admissions, but the silence said enough. The board moved on, quietly, carefully. The letter was filed. A note was added to the next agenda. Clarify HOA jurisdiction boundaries. No one defended her actions. No one mentioned the party. No one even asked about the lock. They were already distancing themselves, one legal phrase at a time. And Jake? He sat on his porch that evening, watching the meeting let out across the street. Board members exited with tight smiles and quick glances, barely pausing to speak. Karen came out last. Alone. No clipboard, no smug wave, no HOA proclamation. Just her, clutching a folder to her chest, like it might protect her from what came next. Jake didn't wave. She didn't look his way. But he could feel the air had changed. Not with anger, not with revenge, just quiet, definitive consequence. The kind written in statute, notarized, and signed in triplicate. It didn't happen overnight, but it didn't take long either. At first, it was just whispers, the kind that float across driveways and front lawns like pollen in spring. Did you hear what she did to that gate? I thought that path was private. She let strangers into someone's yard? Seriously? Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs turned into passive glances. Then came the polite but icy smiles at block gatherings, the kind you offer strangers, not someone who's lived 3 doors down for 7 years. Karen felt it immediately, though she tried to pretend otherwise. She still walked her dog on schedule, still wore her HOA badge to Saturday trash pickups, still dropped off newsletters with printed bullet points in bold. But the greeting stopped. People no longer lingered when she waved. Some crossed the street altogether. Others offered a curt nod. Nothing more. It wasn't open rebellion. It didn't need to be. It was exile by indifference. And then, quietly, something started circulating. A single-page form, tucked into mailboxes. No name on the header, no email. Just a header in bold, petition for removal of current HOA president. Beneath it, a short paragraph citing repeated boundary overreach, unauthorized actions against private property, and endangerment of community reputation through legal exposure. Signatures were optional. Anonymous drop-off encouraged. Jake saw it one evening, half sticking out of his mailbox like a paper tongue. He read it once, folded it back, and placed it neatly inside. He didn't sign it, he didn't need to, because the neighborhood had already spoken, some louder than others, like the Taylors down the block who returned their HOA dues pending reorganization, or Mrs. Nash who ripped out the compliance flowers Karen had once demanded she plant. But most spoke in silence. They stopped attending the meetings, stopped reading the newsletters, stopped pretending Karen still held authority. And slowly, without fanfare, the air changed. The quiet deference she'd once commanded, the small flinches when she walked past, the nervous compliance, dissolved, like fog under sunlight. One afternoon, Jake was watering his lawn when he saw her on her porch, unscrewing the small brass plaque that had hung there since her election 3 years ago. HOA President Karen Holloway. She didn't do it ceremonially. There was no sigh, no dramatic pause. Just 2 quick turns of a screwdriver and it was gone. She didn't look around, didn't say a word. She just turned and walked back inside. And the plaque? It never came back up. There were no announcements, no formal statement, no official handover of power. But no one needed one. The message was clear, as plain as an empty porch wall. She was done. Not because she was removed, because no one followed anymore. The new lock wasn't just a replacement. It was a message. Jake installed it himself over the course of a quiet Saturday morning. No announcements, no drama. Just clean work, measured steps, and the soft hum of a power drill. This time, it wasn't a standard padlock. It was a military-grade electronic access system tied directly into his home's broader security grid. The gate now opened with a 6-digit keypad code or facial recognition synced to a secure server. Every entry logged, every attempt recorded. Above it, mounted in perfect alignment with the camera installed by the federal team, Jake added one more element, a black and white aluminum sign riveted cleanly into the steel. Private military access, do not enter, monitored 24/7. The letters were bold, cold, and final. No interpretation. No ambiguity. This was no longer a gate someone might assume they could pass through. It was a line, a border, a statement. And from that day on, no one, not neighbor, not teenager, not well-meaning dog walker, ever touched it again. Even the wind seemed to keep its distance. Karen saw it, of course. Everyone did. The whole block noticed. It gleamed in the afternoon sun like a silent sentinel. The end of an argument no one dared reopen. She still walked her dog, but the route changed. She avoided the side of the block where Jake's yard backed onto the lane, took the long way around, even when it meant 3 extra turns. And if she happened to pass by when Jake was out front, no eye contact, no wave, not even the fake smile she used to flash like a warning light. The HOA never brought it up again. Not at the next meeting, not in the monthly bulletin, not even in whispers. It became one of those understood things, like the street that always flooded in spring, or the neighbor whose roses no one dared critique. Everyone just knew. The gate stood untouched. Jake's cameras kept blinking. And peace, structured, quiet, unmistakable peace, settled back over the neighborhood like a weighted blanket. Not because people were afraid, but because for the first time in a long time, they respected the line. Order hadn't shouted its return. It had locked it in, coded and sealed, and watched from above. Jake Harper was never one for drama. He hadn't joined the military to bark orders or prove a point. He never chased titles, never cared for small-town power circles, and certainly never planned on becoming the center of any neighborhood saga. All he ever wanted was simple: privacy, security, and peace of mind. A quiet house, a clear perimeter, a life where the rules were clear and the boundaries respected. And in the end, that's exactly what he got. Not by raising his voice, not by retaliating with petty moves or matching Karen's arrogance with his own, but by doing what he always did, staying calm, staying exact, following the code. He let the evidence speak. Let the documents move through the channels they were meant to move through. Let the law, slow, steady, and absolute, carry the weight that emotion never could. The neighborhood learned something in the process. Not just about federal easements or property lines, but about how real consequences don't always arrive with sirens or shouting. Sometimes they come in manila envelopes, sometimes in silence, in ignored meetings, in changed walking routes. Jake didn't gloat. There were no smug smiles or passive-aggressive notes taped to anyone's door. He trimmed his hedges, washed his truck, watered his lawn, and every now and then he glanced at the gate. Still locked, still silent, still untouched. It wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about restoration, about things returning to their rightful place. Karen would never admit it, of course, but she didn't have to. Her silence said more than any apology ever could. Because justice, the real kind, isn't always loud. It doesn't have to bang the table or announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes, justice is just the quiet that follows a storm, the calm of knowing the boundary you drew is finally seen and respected, that you don't have to fight anymore. Jake sat on his porch that evening, the air still, the sun slipping behind the rooftops. No shouting, no letters, just the sound of sprinklers a few houses down and the low buzz of the keypad security light glowing green behind the fence. And in that silence was the sweetest justice of all.